Nashville. And for I guess for the next like 30 minutes or so, I'm going to just kind of talk you through the story of Warner. That's the kind of my story. And then we're going to leave some time at the end for questions. So this is going to be like a family discussion. So I'm going to apologize on the front end because I get excited when I talk sometimes. So if I keep going and y'all like, hey, it's time for us to start asking some questions, I just need somebody to say, hey, Ricki, calm down, because I'm telling you, I get excited especially when we're talking about this work.
Well, we want your excitement, but I will stop you and lead us into the Q&A.
There you go. So hey, look, I promise you, sometimes I need it. So to understand where we're at, you have to understand where we've come from. So about 2.5, 3 years ago, I took over Warner. Warner was it was a priority school. And when we say priority school, we talk about the bottom 5%, but every school in the bottom 5% of the state isn't created equal. So Warner was in the bottom 1%. Warner was 3% proficient in literacy and 3% proficient in numeracy and 5% proficient in literacy. At the time, Warner only had 200 students. So in 3rd and 4th grade, that's the sampling that we get for T and Ready. You're talking about 60 students. So basically, 1 student in the whole school was proficient in math and 2 students in the whole school were proficient in reading. But you went in the inverse when it came to discipline. The school had 200 students, but that previous school year logged 900 disciplinary referrals. So you're talking about a school where just, students were making a lot of poor choices, things of that nature. Teachers were quitting left and right. Hence the reason I tell you, Dr. Martin ended up coming in the middle of the school year for us because the librarian left. But you had the 3 years before I got there, you had about 4 teachers that quit in the middle of the school year. So you have multiple cohorts of students who were educated by substitutes for half the school year because the teachers kept leaving. So we sat down with the team and said, hey, we have to do something drastic. We have to really take on an aggressive approach to this. And hence the reason we've been able to do some exciting things. And within the last 3 years, we went from a level 1 school, which is the bottom of the state, to a level 5 school, which is the highest in the state. When it looks at TVOS growth, we had the commissioner, the governor come tour the school to see the things. And they kept asking the question and said, hey, Dr. Gibbs, what's the secret sauce to this work? Because the State Department did a scatter plot of all the schools across the state, and you had this one little dot that sat way over in the corner, and it was Warner, and it was a school that served over 90% economically disadvantaged students, but the growth we were achieving over 5 years worth of growth. So they wanted to know how that happens. So to understand how that happens and why I'm so passionate about that work, I'm gonna take you all the way back to 1983. That's the year I was born. So in 1983, January 4th, actually, well, funny story, January 3rd, that Monday, there's some railroad tracks that separates the county of Miami and the city of Miami. I was born and raised in Liberty City. My mom was driving one day. She ran over the railroad tracks a little bit too fast. Water broke. A couple hours later, at 3:28 a.m. on January the 4th, I changed her life by entering into this world. So at the time, my mom and dad were married. I was gonna, when at birth, I was gonna have a typical childhood. I had both parents, things of that nature. Things were going well. My mom was a legal secretary her whole life. She still actually is a legal secretary to this day. My dad kind of did some different things throughout his life, but he got addicted to cocaine and crack and all that stuff. So we went through a part where he was strung out and he used to beat my mom. And I tell everybody, when we talk about childhood trauma changes children. And that's why, again, I'm gonna tie this into the work at Warner. Because I witnessed my dad beat my mom for 2 years, before she finally got up the courage to leave them. I tell everyone, I remember going to kindergarten. My kindergarten teacher name was Miss Fabian. At the time, I thought she was probably the prettiest lady I've ever seen. She was just a gorgeous lady. She's a young teacher. You know, I'm 5, but I can remember Miss Fabian. And then I remember Miss Rashid, who was my 3rd grade teacher. I don't remember going to 1st or 2nd grade. And I tell people, yes, you know, hey, I got a doctorate degree. That's a terminal degree. I got great grades in school. I wasn't that smart that I went to kindergarten and then went straight to 3rd grade. So I know I went to 1st and 2nd grade, but because I've suppressed those memories so much because of the trauma I was facing, I can't remember anything of those years. So my childhood was one of those childhoods that because of that trauma, I acted out a lot. So when I was in the 4th grade, I got kicked out of school for 180 days. So I have a presentation that I do that says you get from getting kicked out of school to running a school. I'm that child. So when we talk about the power of second chances and the power of investing in our young people, I'm that living lesson because I got kicked out of school for 180 days for throwing a chair at a teacher when I was in the 4th grade. We're gonna fast forward for the sake of time through this evening. I ended up changing schools a couple times because my mom just said, "Hey, Ricki, you need something different." And I met an educator by the name of Tony Lassane. Tony Lassane is the founder and CEO of In Focus Magazine. And Tony Lassane was Teach for America before Teach for America became a thing. He was a journalist that majored in English. And for 3 years, he taught in an inner city middle school. And I just so happened to be one of the students he educated. Tony Lassane changed my life. He taught me how to play chess. He taught me to be a thinker and showed me that there were things bigger than Liberty City. So if you know anything about Miami and Liberty City is one of the most crime-ridden neighborhoods in our country. If you look at drugs, violence, gangs, all of that is kind of just compressed right in the middle of Liberty City. He exposed me to a world outside of that. So I took to that rant, and it was one of those things that I realized, man, I don't have to go to school and be disrespectful to adults to get people's attention. If I just go to school and do my work and kind of navigate this space, school can be okay. So I graduated high school. I was all state in football. So I got a scholarship to Tennessee State University, came to Nashville to play football. I never thought about going to college. My sister is the only person in my family, and my family's huge in Miami, that even went to college. So going to college wasn't a thing for me. I just came to play football, and I said I was going to play football and go back home. Ended up falling in love with the city. So I majored in elementary education at Tennessee State University. I also there we go. I also have a master's in administration and supervision from Tennessee State University, and my doctorate is from Lipscomb University in organizational and strategic change, or organizational leadership and strategic change. When I graduated from Tennessee State with my bachelor's in elementary education, I was a December graduate. So I was planning on just sitting at home, playing my PlayStation, and then I was going to try to teach in the fall. But some of my friends was going to a job fair, and I said, well, hey, I'm going to go. That was the moment that I said it changed my career, but also changed the lives of a lot of boys and girls in Nashville. I had a chance to meet one of Metro Nashville School's jewels. To this day, I tell everybody, if you ever have a chance to meet Kay Stafford. Kay was a principal in the district and has been in central office. And to this day, she's still in central office in the HR department. She is an absolute jewel, and she sold me on Metro Schools. We had a 5-minute conversation. I was going to table to table, and Kay said, Mr. Gibbs, back then, she was like, you can do some powerful work, because we have a district full of children that look like you, but don't see anybody like you in the elementary school. And just those words alone, I was like, you know what? That's why I'm doing this. Education changed my life. So I wanted to be that person for somebody else. But it wasn't until she said that to me that I said, you know what? I can actually do this. So she scheduled me an interviews. I taught third grade at Paragon Mills Elementary for 4 years. I was an assistant principal for 5 years, and then I've been an executive principal for 8 years. I tell people those years have flown by. It's crazy in my world how fast those years are flown by. So to understand where we are at Warner, you got to understand, I truly believe this is God's work. And I won't let anybody tell me anything other than the work we're doing is God's work, simply because I was the principal at Glengarry Elementary in South Nashville. My wife decided that, hey, I want to move to Memphis and I want to be closer to my family. So I'm a good husband. I don't want to go to Memphis, but I said, hey, yeah, if you want to go, let's go. I resigned from my school in South Nashville and we moved to Memphis. 3 months later, she says, I'm not really feeling the city. I kind of want to go back to Nashville. Now, mind you, we sold our house. We, resigned from our jobs, everything. So I'm like, you want to go back to Nashville? So I was like, oh, well, okay. Well, I called Dr. Joseph. He was our superintendent at the time, and said, hey, Doc, my wife is thinking about coming back. And I'm looking to come back to the district. Is there anything going to be open? Inglewood Elementary was opening up. I went in, I interviewed for Inglewood. That was the only school I never interviewed for Warner. I only interviewed for Inglewood. But when I sat down and talked about my strategic plan on how I wanted to transform a school, I got a call an hour after my interview. Call went just like this. Say hello. And it was Dr. Coons, who's at the State Department now. Dr. Coons called me. She was like, hey, Ricki, I have some great news. She was like, the team loved you in the interview. I was like, awesome. She was like, but I want you to think about, would you accept taking the principal job at Warner instead of Inglewood? I said, Warner? You talking about the school that's in the bottom? And I know Warner because I've been there before. I knew the stories and things of that nature. I was like, the school that's in the bottom 1%. She was like, yeah. She was like, the team thinks your strategic drive will be perfect there. I said, can I have 48 hours to get back to you? Now, I want to come back to Nashville, but I don't know if I want to come back for that job. So I'm like, okay, let me get 48 hours. I went home, talked to my wife. We prayed about it. And she said, let's do it. So I took over, not knowing what I was walking into. I knew the school had been struggling, but I didn't know the school had been struggling. Like, so it was one of those that the school was just in need of some passionate educators coming in. So that cuts you up to speed. We found out what was going on with the discipline, things of that nature. I sat down and had a conversation, and Doc can remember some of this conversation with the staff. I told the staff clearly, if we're going to transform this school, we're going to have to escape what I consider the biggest lie that has ever been told in education. So if you know an educator, I promise you, if you call them tonight, they're going to tell you, yep. And as educators, we say this all the time, and it's the biggest lie ever told in education. I'm going to cue you in. So in the educational circle, we say all the time, if we only focus on what happens in between our four walls, we can change a child's life, because as educators, we can ensure that they get a great education. That is the biggest single lie ever told in education, because what happens in our four wall matters, but what they bring from outside of those four walls is critical. What they go back to when they leave our four walls is their life. So by just saying, let's only focus when they're with us, we cheat our boys and girls of exposure and just life-altering thoughts. that as educators, and we don't do it out of malice, but it's just something that has been indoctrinated into us, and we think that it's right. So I told the staff, we have to escape that, because what we figured out was, we sat down and started looking at numbers, and I asked people, Warner sits in the middle of a zip code 37206. That zip code is 66% white. How is this school 99% Black? And it was a question that when I asked, I made the mistake of asking that question out loud, and everybody just kind of looked at me. But I literally was just really wanting to know, how can a school sit in the middle of a zip code that's 66% white and be 99% Black without somebody purposefully letting that happen? So we said, you know what? We have to do some things that not only attract the boys and girls that are zoned for us, but how can we begin to just transform our school? Step one, and I'm gonna tell you, and I see time, but I'm gonna break it down. The secret sauce is a 4-step process. Feel free to share it, but it's a 4-step process. Step one, we needed to take a different approach to discipline. So when you have 900 disciplinary referrals, obviously, and the school had 150 out-of-school suspensions. It's 200 students. How do you have 150 out-of-school suspensions? But obviously, suspending students, they're not scared of getting suspended. Calling their mom and daddy, yeah, I mean, you know, they may cry, they may get a spanking, but that's still not changing behavior. We said, let's create an approach to just totally transform behavior, but we have to do it in a way that it's not negative consequences, because that's all these babies know is negative consequences. So that's how we created the partnership with Be Well in School, and we created our non-traditional approach to school discipline. We like to tell people, with this approach to discipline, we're changing school discipline one breath at a time. We decided to teach our boys and girls mindfulness, teach them how to self-regulate, so that they can begin to take ownership of their actions. The perfect illustration of this story and mindfulness practices, we have a child goes, and he's still with us now. He's in 4th grade. Doc know him. I'm gonna just call him Brooks. So Brooks is a miniature version of Ricki Gibbs. Brooks is that kid. He's a smart boy, but if you want to fight, he want to fight. If you want to sit there and write your paper, he wants to write his paper. Brooks will do whatever you want to do. He's just that type of kid. So he was in dance class one day, and they were moving around, they're dancing. A kid bumped him. He got mad. He pushed the boy. The dance teacher saw the push. She didn't see the bump. So she got onto him. She said, Brooks, why'd you push him? He tried to explain. The teacher was like, no, I saw you. He got mad. He ran out of class. Now, in educational circles, I told you we got our certain things we like to do. We also like to let other people know we're very educated. So we like to use big words sometimes. So instead of somebody getting on the radio saying, hey, Dr. Gibbs, Brooks has ran out of class, and this was the first time I ever heard a school use this term. They said, I got a call, it's like, Dr. Gibbs, Brooks has eloped. I was eloped. I looked at my secretary, what are they talking about? Like, what's eloped? She was like, that we went to a training, and they told us when kids run out of class, they eloped. I was like, okay. I was like, well, did anybody check the Be Well room? They was like, no. Our procedure has been in years past, if a child runs out of class, we start on the bottom floor and work our way up. Warner's a 3-level school. I'm not working my way up. I'm not doing that, simply because we've had conversations when we started this implementation. If something is going on, go to the Be Well room, get yourself calmed down. So I go to the Be Well room, and this is where I made a shift, and we made a shift as a school. Brooks is in the Be Well room. He's already calming down. I make a call on the radio. Hey, Brooks is up here. You're good. This is where I made a mistake as principal. I stopped his calming down process and said, Brooks, come here. Because I'm mad you done ran out of class. How dare you run out of my classroom? Hey, tell me why I shouldn't suspend you right now. He looked at me. A 9-year-old said, man, Dr. Gibbs, you told me before I do something silly and get suspended from school, I needed to come to the Be Well room and calm down. What you want me to do? I said, you know what? Man, you absolutely right. You did exactly what now, would I have said, would I have rather you raise your hand and say, excuse me, teacher, I am upset right now. I need to go to the Be Well room. In a perfect world, that's what I want you to do. But we don't live in a perfect world. His fight or flight mentality said, either I'm gonna stay in this class and do something or I'm gonna run out. He ran out, but he ran to the safe place, to the Be Well space. I said, you know what? You're right. Go back in there. Kid went back in, finished calming down. Has had a great day. He's a principal's list student every 9 weeks. The kid makes straight A's, but he comes from a difficult background. So step one in the turn process, that secret sauce, we have to find ways to have non-traditional approaches to school discipline because consequences doesn't work. You can't consequence a child into behaving the way you want them to behave. We have to teach them how to self-regulate. Our society has prison system full of adults who have made permanent decisions based upon temporary emotions. That's what school discipline is all about. As adults, we're creating permanent decisions, out of school suspension on this child marks. We're creating permanent marks based upon temporary emotions. Cal walked out of class, so I'm gonna show Cal, you're gonna get out of my school. Or, Jennifer decides that she wants to just talk to Laura all class and the teacher's tired of them talking. So as an adult, I'm gonna make that temporary emotion. I'm upset, you're gonna go home. Why are we making permanent decisions based upon temporary emotions? Let's breathe, let's calm down, and then move forward. So creating that non-traditional approach, and when we get to our question and answer part, I can dig into some more about that non-traditional approach. Step two, we had to start telling our own story. So one of the things that I told the staff, and we had an honest conversation, if I accepted the principalship and I had hesitations about coming to Warner, what do you think other people have heard stories about too? So I heard stories about kids walking down the hallway, cursing teachers out and doing this and doing that. Like, if I heard that story, what do you think somebody else heard? Because what we know about stories, nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. So I'm gonna tell you that again. So nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. So just because Carolyn decided to walk down the hall one day and it could have been one of those situations where she was trying to close the door, but she just gave it a little bit more strength than she thought, and it just went boom. Jim heard it, and Jim went home and said, baby, look, man, this girl was walking down the hallway and she just slammed the door. I don't know what was going on, but it was just crazy that day. Then Jim's wife called Julie and was like, man, Jim just told me about what happened at school. Kid walked down the store, slammed the door, then just said, I'm out of here. So the stories just began to grow. Nobody cares about the truth when the lie's more entertaining. So I said, let's control our own narrative. Let's make sure we're being proactive about putting out the good work that's happening, because as educators, we do life-changing work, but we are not very good salespeople at letting other people know about our work. So I said, let's make sure that we let everybody know what work we're doing. Step one, non-traditional approach. Step two, let's control our narrative. Step three, we must hire, attract, and retain the best people possible. I get a lot of credit for the work that's done at Warner, but I tell people, if you ever hear me speak, it ain't about me. I have an amazing team of people that supports the work. Ricki Gibbs hasn't taught one child how to any kind of mindfulness practices. I haven't taught one child how to read. When last school year, right before the pandemic, we took the MAP assessment, we were the #1 school in Metro Nashville Public Schools for growth on MAP. with 78.9% of our boys and girls meeting their math growth goals. We were one of only 7 schools that hit that KPI. No, excuse me, one of only 12 schools that hit that KPI in literacy and numeracy. I didn't do any of that. I just put on suits every day and walk around and cheer people on. I have some amazing teachers that do that heavy lifting. So my job was to make sure that we attract, retain, and hire world-class teachers. So step 1, non-traditional approach. Step 2, tell your story. Step 3, make sure you have the right people. Step 4, you got to get the community involved. I left that one for the last one because it ties everything back together. Remember I told you the biggest lie ever told in education? Only focus in on those 4 walls. If you do that, you lose what back in the day, I don't know about you all, but I had a grandma that prayed for me. I had a mama that went to church and made sure that our family was blessed. So when Big Mama said it took the whole village to raise us, Big Mama meant that. You go walking down the street and you get in front of Laura Lee's house and Laura Lee see you acting up. Laura Lee gonna grab that switch, or Laura Lee come to bring it to take you to the house. But the same difference is if I'm walking down the street and I'm thirsty and I see and I'm passing by Miss Elise's house, Miss Elise gonna say, "Baby, you want some sweet tea? Come on, get you a glass." So it took the whole village. So when we talk about that community support is critical because everybody in that community has to have an invested interest in seeing the young people of that community succeed. So we made it purposeful attack to make sure that we were connecting with local businesses, especially our parents, obviously, other local schools, because contrary to popular belief, yes, I am a public school educator. There's great educators in the charter sector. There's great educators in the private sector. There's great educators who are homeschooling their kids. Whatever works for your family is cool. As educators, we must connect and share strategies. So we made sure we connected with other schools. But then most importantly, we connected with places of worship and faith that are around our school. Because one thing that I know, and 2 things for sure, nothing happens unless you have people praying for you. And that power of prayer, I tell people, it changes things, it moves things. So we wanted to make sure that we connected with our community. So when we talk about those 4 steps and the secret sauce to get the success that we've had at Warner, yes, we've innovated a lot of things. We've been super aggressive of how we did it, but we break it down into 4 steps. Non-traditional approach to school discipline. Tell your story. Why? Because nobody cares about the truth when the lie is more entertaining. Make sure you have the right people and make sure you have that community support. I'm going to pause because I'm already at 35 minutes. And if I was also captain of the debate team, I left that part of the story out so I can talk all night. I am a talker, but I definitely want to leave time for questions so that way we can dig into some of the conversation.
That was wonderful. I was like, you can tell he's a teacher. He's calling on the students. He's calling the names. He's involving us all. It was beautiful. Thank you. So I'll start off with a question. So tell us a little bit about how the pandemic has affected Warner. And then I'm curious about how many students came back and how many chose to stay home once they had the opportunity to come back to school.
Yeah. So and you heard part of it on the podcast. So yeah, hopefully you could tell just even by interaction, like I'm always super excited about stuff, high energy. You ask me how I'm doing, I'ma always tell you everything is everything because I never get too low, I never get too high. I kind of just, I believe life is good. The grown people told me anytime you see one on this side of the dirt, you should rejoice and thank God. So that's what I do. But the pandemic kind of hit us because we had a lot of momentum going. We were on track to not only, excuse me, every school in the state has a AMO, an annual measurable objective. It's basically a goal. Because of where Warner was starting at, our goal was the state said, I want you to get 13% of your students proficient. You also get a double goal. The double goal our double goal was 19%. You probably saying, well, Gibbs, 13 plus 13, that's double 26. That's not how the state works it. Don't ask me how to do the math. I don't know. I'm just telling you what the goals were. So our regular goal was 13%. Our double goal was 19%. Most schools struggle reaching their goal. Very few schools hit their double goals. We were on track right before the pandemic to double our double AMO. We were on track to have 47% of students proficient. So I tell people all the time, so when you hear on the podcast, I was like, man, I'm kind of down. Look, if we would have got 47%, I already had it in my mind. I was going to be on the cover of Newsweek. I was going to give a, interview with the New Yorker. I was ready to, we was ready to go worldwide. And it was like, pandemic. So it was one that we struggled in the beginning of how do we do this work? Because when it happened, we said, okay, we need to get out in the community and we knew our boys and girls didn't have access to technology. We needed to get them packets. But, because everything was so new, we got told, hey, we're not doing that just yet. We don't want you to kind of just settle down. And I'm like, but our families need this. What do you mean? Like, we got to get this to them. Part of the system. So we worked through it. And luckily, we eventually got that green light to just get stuff to them. But the pandemic showed us what the true inequities are in education. We had been screaming it from the mountaintops that boys and girls on certain sides of towns, they just don't have access to other things. And it was when everybody had to sit still and go home, it was mind-boggling to people because, the first thing people said was, well, we got this CARES Act and the mayor is giving everybody a laptop. And this is where I will say, shout out to Dr. Battle and Mayor Cooper, because they were forward thinkers, because when they was just talking about laptops, you had somebody like me that was sitting back. I'm a bit of a cynical at times. I'm like, great, you giving my babies a laptop. What they gonna do with it? They don't have internet. And that was the thing. Most people think, well, everybody has internet. No, not everybody. So when they got the hotspots and was like, well, we're gonna give every child that needs it a computer and a hotspot so they have access. I said, okay, now this is equitable. So it was one of those things that we had to figure out that, and it was tricky because a lot of our families struggle. I tell people, we have a generation of young people that know how to use this. You give a baby a phone, they can do anything. They can unlock it. They can figure everything out. Laptops, if you're not in corporate America or you send a bunch of emails, most adults don't even own laptops because you can do everything from your phone. Nobody sits down and goes on Facebook and Instagram and logs onto their computer and sits here and says, well, I'm a stroll Instagram from my computer. We do it from our phone. So that was trying to navigate and educate parents about how to work the laptops was huge for us. And then just trying to figure out how do we continue getting resources to our families, because what the part of the story that a lot of people don't know, because Warner serves so many students that come from Casey, the median household income in Casey is $12,000 a year. The median household income is $12,000 a year. To think about how a family of 4 or 5 is surviving off of $12,000 a year is mind-boggling. So a lot of those families don't have extra resources to do much. So in my mind, I'm started thinking, well, how are they going to get exposure to things? How are they going, how are they going to get at least two hot meals a day? Because that's what the school provides. So we had to try to figure that part out. And through this whole process, Warner has been one of the outliers from the district. So when we came back to school in person versus virtual, we had an increase in enrollment this year. So where a lot of schools were having a decrease because of the pandemic, we got more students, which is a blessing. So we were about 75% in person, and about 25% of our students remained virtual. So we are on roster right now. We have 247 students, and about 193 of them are in person, and the other students remain virtual.
So I'm sure you were glad about that.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
more of them came so that you could, you know.
I tell people all the time, if you ask me, say, Ricki, give me your honest opinion, in person versus virtual, I'm gonna tell you in person all day. There's just certain things that we can do in person. If I just walk over and Antoinette is sitting there writing, and I can lean over and just, hey, look at this. I need you to do this. Versus if I want to have a conversation and I'm trying to call Beth, but Beth camera's off, and I'm like, hey Beth, I need you to unmute. I can't do it. So it's one of those things that when we're in person, there's just certain kind of magic that can happen that we just can't do in a virtual setting. So absolutely, I was ecstatic that most of our families chose to come back in person.
All right. Well, I know there are other questions. So if you'll raise your hand, I will call on you and then we'll just go from there. So Price, I saw your hand first. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ricki, for being here tonight. I had a question, twofold. One is, how does it work in your HR world when you're trying to make sure that teacher's willing to get on your bus? And secondly is, do you have 100% control over that?
So I'm gonna start. The second question is easier than the first question. 100% control? No. In a district as big as Metro Nashville, at the school level, no one will have 100%. I don't even 100% control hiring anyone now. I would say I control 90% of it because I'm the one that will make all the recommendations, but only the HR department can extend the official offer, do the background checks and certifications, all that kind of stuff. So the principal has a major role in it, but because of how the system is structured, it's not 100% controlled. And then when we talk about make sure we have the right people. So there's a process that you can, you can document, do all that kind of stuff. And if somebody's not performing, you can write them up, things of that nature. There's a lot of principals that do that. I personally don't, because I truly believe in pulling people to make sure that they're focusing in on their strengths. So when we talk about how I create the team to make sure that we're galvanizing people and getting the right people on the bus, I strategically just share out the vision for the school and how we're going to go about it, and make sure that I'm going to put every support in place for you to be successful. If you decide at that point, hey, and I tell everyone, I believe in having open and honest conversations. If we're all adults in the room, I want us to be adults. So if something's not working, I just need you to tell me it's not working and we can figure it out. Versus me saying, well, Price, we had a meeting about this last week. You didn't do it. I'm gonna document this and write you up. I said, well, Price, tell me what I can do to support you. How can I support you and put the resources behind you so that you can be successful in this work? So I come at it from that angle, to put all those supports in place. And sometimes when we get to a point that somebody says, man, Dr. Gibbs, this just isn't for me. This isn't my sweet spot. We have that conversation, and then we respectfully move on and go. That teacher goes and finds something else that fits them, and I'll find a hero that can step in and do that work. But it's one that when we talk about getting the right people on the bus, and the same way I talked about, we can't consequence children into performing. I was taught early on, you catch more bees with honey than vinegar. So when I talk to teachers and really to try to get a teacher to run through a wall, I'm not going to say, man, Cal, I was in your classroom today. You had 15 things wrong. I come in and say, Cal, lesson probably wasn't the best, but man, when you did this, look how you got everybody's attention. I want you to focus in on that. So we talk about trying to make all of our educators consciously aware of things that they're doing well. And by focusing in on their strengths, we try to build them up that way. Because one of the things that is a secret in education right now, we're getting ready to hit a teacher shortage because so many teachers are walking away from the profession. So I always caution leaders when we start talking about turnaround work, when they say, well, if that person's not the right person on the bus, you just get them off the bus and get somebody else. Well, somebody else isn't always there. And you know, the grown folks, I say grown folks because the song came out before I was really listening to music. When they said, well, I think one thing the line was, you gotta love, if you can't have the one you want, you gotta love the one you're with. So sometimes we have to grow people. Instead of trying to replace them, we have to grow them. And is one of the things that it has worked for me, because I simply said, no, you give me an educator that's passionate, I can teach you to be a better teacher. I can't teach you passion. So that's my only requisite when we talk about getting on the bus and being the right person. As long as you're passionate about teaching and learning, I can teach you to be a good teacher. I can't teach you to love Vincent if you don't want to love him. You got to come with that. So if you can come with that, I can teach you how to do everything else.
Wonderful. Okay, Johnny, I see your hand. I think you're on mute, Johnny. There you go.
Okay. Dr. Gibbs, first of all, let me say how much we really appreciate you being here. This has been very interesting and eye-opening. And the thing that I want to ask you, though, you mentioned the 4 areas that are important to you in improving the program, and number 4 being the community. To me, that can be an extremely important area in many schools. And I'd like to ask you, what ways do you reach out to the community yourself as a principal, specifically, and how can communities come forward to help you?
Perfect. So what I didn't tell you when, Mr. Lassane, I told you he changed my life. He also, he created the magazine, In Focus magazine. And I was one of his original foot soldiers. So we used to stand in front of the pub. So in Miami, you got 2 grocery stores. Well, back then you had Publix and you had Winn-Dixie. So when I came to Tennessee, I saw Kroger. I was like, what's a K. Roger? Strange. I never seen a K. Roger before until somebody told me it was Kroger. I knew Winn-Dixie, Publix. So we used to stand in front of Publix and sell the magazine for $2. And he taught us it wasn't about the money. I just wanted you to figure out how within 1 minute of meeting somebody, how can you make a connection and get that person to want to invest in you? So I sold the magazines for $2. So that taught me the confidence to go and just find a business in my local neighborhood, go knock on the door and say, hey, I'm Dr. Gibbs. I'm the new principal at Warner Arts Magnet. We're looking to connect with the community. I'm not sure if you've ever been to the school, toured the school, but I would love for you to be my invited guest. I want you to be my personal guest. Come see the school, see the work we're doing. So I purposely went through the neighborhood to Sky Blue Cafe, all the places in 5 Points, some of our local churches and some of the churches that actually connected with me too. And just, hey, I'm Ricki Gibbs. I would love for us to connect. I'm inviting you to come tour the school. And especially our churches, I would say, I would love to come one Sunday and just, greet the congregation. Just ask someone, because you can hear about the work, but to hear it from me versus someone else could be just a little different. So I made sure that I went to the church services. to just connect with the people of faith and said, hey, we're asking for your support because we want to do this life-changing work. When people ask, so that's how I just went in the community. I had that confidence to say, I'm gonna knock on your door. You don't know me, I don't know you, but you do business in this community. The boys and girls of my school, families come through here. If they're successful, you're successful. So the better the school is doing, the better property value, everything else. So we all have an invested interest in seeing these babies succeed. So when people say, what are things that the school that partners can do for us? Just like I got that 4-step process, I got 3 steps. I try to make everything easy for you. So I tell people, we can do this support in 3 steps. Step 1 is the most important. If you're a person of faith, pray for us. If you're just a person that believes in energy, send good energy our way. Because again, I had a mama and a grandma that prayed for me, and I know what the power of prayer can do. So if you do nothing else, when you pray at night, pray for us by name, because the Lord says, if you call it by name, so be it. So pray for us by name. Say, Lord, I just want you to just bless the educators and students at Warner Arts Magnet Elementary. Just pray for us by name. And if prayer is not your thing, just when you send a good energy, just, hey, send that energy our way. We want that. That's step 1. Step 2, if you have time, volunteer. You don't have to be a teacher by no means, because one of the most powerful things in literacy is just for boys and girls to hear other fluent readers read. Too many of our boys and girls don't get that bedtime story at night. So they just need to just hear somebody read. You're talking about, and we're talking children's books, so it's 10, 15 minutes tops that you can go through a whole book and just sit down with a child and read to them. If you say, man, Gibbs, I don't even like reading by myself. I don't want to read no book. No worries. You a talker like me? Come and volunteer at lunch. Sit down at a lunch table. 5-year-olds will say the strangest things to you. Now, most of you all don't have the trouble that I have in life, but as you can see, the light shines on my head. Every day I walk in the cafeteria, you would think I'm not. You get, hey, Dr. Gibbs. And there's always that one child, Dr. Gibbs, your head shining today. I appreciate it, man. So I mean, if you just want to sit down and just hear the innocence of youth, because when the child tells me my head's shining, that's not out of malice. They're not doing, he just literally, man, the floor shining, his head shining. I'm gonna tell him his head shining. So it's one of those things. So if you got time, just sit down and come be a lunch buddy. Come sit down and just volunteer your time any way it can. Whatever you're comfortable with, we can figure out a role for you to suit your comfort level. The third thing is, if you have resources, invest your resources in the school. And I tell folks that, so sometimes they say, well, the school has a budget for pencils, paper. Absolutely. If you want to donate pencils and paper, you can never have too much pencils and paper. That's like somebody saying, hey, I want to donate 10 Bibles to the church. The pastor's not going to turn them down and say, oh, we have enough Bibles. We don't need any more Bibles. You always can use a Bible. That's the same thing for paper and pencil for us. But what we don't have a budget for is teacher incentives and student incentives. We have to normally fundraise for those things. So if you have resources, if you have $100 and you say, I want this $100 to have a huge impact in your school, I will tell you, go buy $10 gift cards to Starbucks. Man, when I pass those things out, you gonna make a teacher's day. And you think a $10 gift card to do that? Absolutely. It's the little things, because it's not the fact that, it's this big gift. It's somebody in the community thinks enough of my work to just tell me thank you. And so that $10 gift card will go a long way. So those 3 things: pray for us, volunteer your time, and if you have resources, invest in teachers incentives and student incentives, because we have to find ways to make students stay excited about learning, but also we need to find ways to keep teachers engaged and excited about their work, and know that it's not just on them, that the whole community is behind them. And something as simple as a $10 gift card will brighten a teacher's day like you've never seen before.
Okay, so I've got a bunch of people in line, Annette. Sorry, we'll get to you, but we're gonna go Carolyn, then Ron, then Vince, and then if we have time, I know we're running close. If you'll give us a few more minutes, Dr. Gibbs.
Oh, look, I've been in Atlanta all weekend with my family, so I'm at home now, so I'm good.
Okay.
I'm not on any time crunch.
We're being respectful of your time, but everybody's really excited. So then we'll go, Carolyn Coleman, our rector, had a question, and then Annette will get to you, okay? So if y'all will just go, I think I said Carolyn Schmidt first, because you had your hand raised.
Oh, I did, and my question was answered. It was about the community. Thank you.
Very good, awesome. Then Vince, you're next.
Am I cutting in front of Ron?
Oh, sorry, but go ahead.
Well, okay. Dr. Gibbs, appreciate you being here. It's funny, you keep talking about 3 steps. You've got a lot of 3 steps. And I went to school, and I have children who went through magnet schools, but we're talking about elementary, then middle, then high school. And you've done great things at Warner, but have you paid attention to, or do you know if your kids are being successful when they feed into either a Meigs or another middle school, or if they're getting to Hume Fogg or MLK or somewhere? Do you get a sense that with all your gains, that they are making a gradual transition to the next 2 steps?
Yeah, so we've sent a number of students to East over the last 2 years. So, and I get a chance to connect with the principal at East often. I actually got a chance to see some of them this past Friday. The East was having a kickball tournament at the same time we were having field day. So I got a chance to go over and check on them. So we are seeing a number of students be successful. One of the things that we realized, and we actually extended it to Lower Stratford for next school year, the majority of our students go to Lower Stratford. That's our feeder school, and that's where, because of transportation, that's where a lot of our students go. One of the things that one of the things when I start talking about equity in Nashville, we have one of the biggest school choice systems in the country, where families can choose to go to any school that they apply and get accepted. But if you don't have transportation, you don't have much of a choice. You go wherever that bus will take you from your house. And for our boys and girls who families don't have a car that live in Casey, they're zoned for Lower Stratford. So they begin to go into Lower Stratford. And we noticed the last year and a half, some of our students who we had so many supports for them in place in elementary, and the middle school didn't have it. So they struggled some socially as well as academically. And we would hear from their parents about, well, y'all did this for them, and now they can't have that. So one of the things we said was, and we were purposeful about it, we needed to reach out to Lower Stratford and say, hey, these are some supports that are working for our boys and girls who come from the same community as your boys and girls come from. Would you be interested in having this conversation? Dr. Wallace, who was the principal, or I say was because she's retiring, so they have a new principal coming next year. But Dr. Wallace said, absolutely. So part of this school year has been planning and getting things ready. So they're going to extend our Be Well program into Lower Stratford next school year, because to answer your question, Vince, while some students had to have success, because our boys and girls experience so much trauma coming from Casey, when you remove that from them, some of them just crashed. And I give people the example all the time. Benson, let's say me and you decide we're going to go for a 5-mile run. Well, I'm only going to run 1 mile, then I'm going to walk, because I don't really see no reason to run anything over a mile. That's just me personal. But let's say we go for a 5-mile run. At the end of that 5-mile run, there's a jug of water that we're going to rehydrate ourselves. Would you take one sip and put the jug down and say, well, I've gotten enough, that's enough for me? Or you going to drink as much as you can until you hydrate yourself? Obviously, you're going to drink as much as you can. But when that's what we realized, we were only giving students a sip and they would leave Warner and they would still need hydration. That they wasn't at the point yet that they could fully self-regulate. So we said we must figure out a way so no matter where they go, especially what they stay in our area, we need to make sure that they have their hydration, they have that support in place, because teaching our boys and girls how to self-regulate is going to be critical for their long-term success. Because I shared with you earlier, and it's a quote that I attribute from Charlemagne the God. He's a radio personality at the Breakfast Club, and he coined that phrase, we have people making permanent decisions based upon temporary emotions, and I don't want that for our boys and girls. So while some have experienced success, some of them have fallen back through the cracks once they left the comfort and the support system at Warner. But we've been purposeful over the last 6 months to say, hey, all of the schools that are in our immediate area, these are the supports we're using. Think about implementing these because it helps our boys and girls, especially the ones that comes from Casey.
Thank you.
Okay, Ron, you're next.
I'd like to pass the torch to Reverend Carolyn just because I want to hear what she has to say. I do have a question, but I can wait.
Okay, well,
Thanks, Ron.
Passed.
Once again, thank you, Dr. Gibbs, for being here. It's really wonderful for you to share your time with us. I know you're an incredibly busy man. I don't want this question to be negative, but I guess I'm looking for an honest answer. Your passion is so visceral and your excitement and positivity, I just can't imagine you ever actually being able to answer this question or actually act on it. But what would make you leave Warner? What would make you, what would make you end your time there?
Oh, well, Rev, that's actually a fairly easy question for me. Remember when I told you I come from humble beginnings? Well, part I didn't tell you is my mom has never made more than $20,000 a year. To this day, I think my mom, as a legal secretary, she makes $27,000 a year. So I came from extreme poverty as well. And because I came from that poverty, I have a drive to make sure that, you know, my wife and my girls have the best life possible. So I say that to say, if somebody offers me a job with the right number, I would probably leave. That's the honest answer. And everybody, I tell people, everybody has a number. I have a number that will get me to leave immediately. Now, if you talk about just long term, ultimately, I want to be a superintendent. So my goal when I left the classroom, I was doing life-changing work in the classroom, but it was only for 20 students at a time. When I became an administrator, I said, now I can do life-changing work for 200. My biggest school has had 700 students. So I can do life-changing work for 700 students at a time. If I'm blessed to become a superintendent one day, now I can change lives for thousands of students through just my thought processes around leadership, how I believe in growing others who will eventually do that life-changing work for our boys and girls. So because I do have ambitions of being superintendent one day, and not necessarily superintendent of Nashville, that would be amazing, but just superintendent in general, that would ultimately get me to leave Warner. But one of the things that I've told everybody that'll listen to me, I won't leave until I know Warner can continue ascending. So right now, a lot of the excitement and energy around Warner is connected to Ricki Gibbs. What I want is all of the energy, excitement for Warner to be connected to Warner and its teachers and students, and my name not even be mentioned in it, because at that point, then I know that's self-sustaining. So in 20 years, when I come back, nobody at the school may know who I am, but because the school is still achieving and having success, I can walk in and proudly say, I was part of that turn process. I was one of the ones who really set that foundation for the success that the school is having. But until the school can get to that point, I know that there's just work to be done. So I've pledged to my teachers and the school community that I'll continue doing the hard work until the school is at a point where it can be self-sustaining. So the thought process about Warner is focused on Warner and not necessarily what Ricki Gibbs brings to Warner.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Heather?
You are taking all the time. Yes, you may.
What kind of scenario, Dr. Gibbs, would be, okay, here's the question. Is there ever a school that is unreclaimable?
In my mind, no. As long as it has students, somebody has to believe it can be transformed simply because that school can have a Ricki Gibbs in it. And what I tell folks all the time, my story is written. I'm a 38-year-old Black male with a terminal degree. I could work anywhere in the country. So if Metro Schools decided tomorrow to say, Dr. Gibbs, your services are no longer needed, while I'll be disappointed, I could go anywhere else and find a job. My school is full of boys and girls that their story is still written. They're 5, 6, 7, 8, and statistics say some of them may not graduate from high school. So we have to, as educators and as just a community, we have to believe every school has power, every school has potential. The difference between Warner and another school who was the exact same as Warner and is still struggling is Warner was able to have a group of educators who came together under a common belief and said, we're going to try some things differently. Now, I will tell you, because of where the school was at, district leadership allowed me to be a little bit more innovative than other schools. So, and this, that other secret part, if you say it, I'm gonna tell you, I didn't, even though this been recorded, I'm gonna still say it wasn't me. Sometimes it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission when you're trying to innovate. Like,
Amen.
It's one of those things, because when you're doing some innovative things, it's outside the box, and folks will say, well, if we can't replicate that across the district, if we can't do it for everybody, we can't okay it for you. So I said, I understand that. I'm gonna just do it, show people it works, and then it's left to somebody that makes way more money than me to figure out how to replicate it everywhere else. But I need to do something that can work for my babies. And you hear me refer to them as my babies, and that's the part that is critical. There has to be some skin in the game. And when I say skin in the game, I don't want anybody to think it's, because they're minority children. I wouldn't care if Warner was in a 100% Black neighborhood and it was all white kids. I'll still call them my babies, because once you send a child to my school, I become part of the family. You become part of the family. And as an educator, as a principal, as a teacher, if you don't have that kind of belief, that's the only way a school will be unclaimable. Like that's the only way a school can't be transformed, if it has people in there who don't believe in the work. You put me in any school in this country, I don't care what neighborhood, what demographic of students, I'm gonna tell you we're gonna be successful because I'm gonna keep preaching it until everybody believes it. So one of my favorite sports athletes is Dion. Dion says, when you look good, you feel good. When you feel good, you play good. When you play good, they pay good. So it's all about confidence. I promise you, if you believe it, you'll be amazed the things that you can do once you decide you believe in it. And that's the same thing for children. Children will do whatever you want them to do, but they'll only do what you ask them to do. So if Alan is in my class and I say, Alan, I need you to get to step 5, but the goal is really 10, Alan's gonna get to 5, and then Alan's gonna be doing his happy dance and rejoicing. I made my goal. I made my goal. I made my goal. Look, he even got it. He gonna be ready. But then we all gonna sit back and say, well, he really needed to get to step 10. The other kids at the other school got to 10. He only got to 5. Don't do that to children. Give them the goal, no matter where they're starting from. It's you give them that goal. If they need to get to 10, put them at 10. Because there's a great philosopher, and I listen to his words all the time. I'm gonna call him one of the greatest philosophers to ever live. He's also a rapper. His name is Dwayne Carter. Some people call him Wheezy F Baby. Some of you may know his music, some of you may not. But he had a quote that says, "I'm not racing, just sprinting." So when we talk about this work that we're doing for students, especially at those schools that are struggling and we need to figure out ways to how to get them back on board, we can't put them in competition with everybody else because that's an unfair race. You have students that are starting 10 feet away from the finish line, and you have students that are starting 100 feet away from the finish line. Don't act like they're racing, but I promise you, if we all just take off sprinting, we can do some life-changing work for those boys and girls. So I love that quote. I live by that quote. I'm not racing, just sprinting.
Okay, Ron, maybe we can have 2 more questions, Ron and Annette, and then we'll close with a prayer. Ricki will lead you out with prayer, and then we'll let you get on with the rest of your evening.
I sure appreciate it. Look, I told you.
I know. I've got
mom and grandma that prayed for me. So I love being around people that pray.
Ricki, I appreciate you so much. I could just listen to you talk for days. I'm telling you.
I hold you to that.
Okay. I'm going to be calling on you. So I have a question. When you said you have to work outside the 4 walls, how do you get the parents on board, especially if there's trauma, there's dysfunction in the family, so that you can support that child to be able to, have higher level thinking instead of the lower level thinking?
Yeah. So that's it's all about connections. So so part of my personality, you see I smile all the time, right? And it's not, one of those things where I just tell people, man, I'm just an ultra happy guy. I went to remember I told you I got kicked out of school? I went to anger management for 2 years. That was part of the deal that got worked out for me to get back in school. I had to go to anger management, and I had to do some community service type stuff. So I learned really fast that, man, if you smile at people, you tend to get, good energy. Energy attracts energy. So it's one that it's all about making those relationships and connecting with people. So when it comes to parents, I try, instead of only trying to connect about what's happening with your child at school, I try to find anything about you that will serve me well and roll from that way. And it can be the wildest thing. I can look in Carolyn's background as Carol, and just so happen I come do a home visit and I see those cabinets. I'm gonna talk about what's happening with your child. Well, my wife was looking at some cabinets the other day, and I want some white cabinets because I just want that pristine kitchen. But I don't talk to me a little bit about that. So I'm gonna find any connection. If you walk in my school and have a sports team jersey on, I'm a Dolphin fan. I tell people I root the home team. While I love it when the Titans are successful, I cheer them on. But I'm a Dolphin fan. I'm a Heat fan. I'm a Hurricane fan. That's how I was raised, and I don't apologize for it. If they're from Miami, I root for them. But I'm gonna make that connection with you because we're gonna have a couple casual conversations about sports every time I see you, and then when I need to have a conversation with you, we've already have that connection, so it's not that cold call. And when your child decides to do something in school, and I call and say, "Hey, this is Dr. Gibbs. I'm calling to talk to you about what your baby's doing in school." It's not well, what y'all doing to him down there? He says that y'all don't like him. I love your baby. I talk to you and your baby every day. I only want what's best for your baby. So let's partner and talk through this. So when we talk about getting parents on board, it begins and ends with that relationship. I find anything that we have in common, and when I say anything, I mean anything, but we begin to make that connection because I know when you connect with people, they're more prone to actually hear you out and not take a defensive stance. But especially parents that need support, they're so used to people beating them down, and it's one that they're doing their best. The one part that we never are told about as adults, the hardest job we'll ever do is the only job we have no training for, and that's being a parent. Nobody trains us to be a parent. You want to be a lawyer, you got to go to law school. You want to be a dentist, you got to go to dental school. You want to be a CPA, you're going to do all those things to do anything else. But to be a parent, no training involved. You just, got to do some grown folk stuff, and then you're a parent. So it's one of those that the hardest job you'll ever do, you have no training for. So it's really important, especially from the school perspective, when we want to connect with parents, especially parents that are struggling, we find ways to just connect with them on a human level first, and then start wrapping those arms of supports around them.
All right, Annette, you're up.
Dr. Gibbs, in the Promise episode, they made a lot of contrast between you and the struggles that Lachlan was having because they simply could not figure out a way to integrate the school. Mm-hmm. And it seemed to me that they were very sincere about that. However, I would just like to ask you, what is your relationship with Lachlan?
Yeah, so I love Christy. Like, Christy's my buddy. Like, me and Christy go to lunch together. We talk shop all the time. And Christy Lewis is the principal at Lachlan. We've actually started doing some partnering things. I've actually partnered with their PTO within the last school year to do some things to try to merge. Don't ever say that out loud. We're not gonna merge the school together and shut one down, but just to connect the schools more so we can be purposeful about all the kids playing together and learning together. So it's one that I tell people all the time, we don't have an adversarial relationship. We are purposeful about the work that we're doing at Warner, and Christy does an amazing job at Lachlan. You talk to any educator, one of the hardest things to do is take students that are already academically high and grow them more. And Christy has figured out a way to do that at Lachlan. So I always tell people, shouts out to Christy. Christy, I love Christy. She's good people. But one of the things that I tell people about in the Promise, and if you haven't heard, the Promise has been nominated for the Peabody Award. And funny story, I got tagged in a bunch of stuff about, the Promise is nominated for the Peabody Award. So I called Maribel and I said, hey, Maribel, congratulations on, the nomination for the Peabody Award. What's that? And she was like, man, in journalism, that's like winning an Oscar. I was like, oh, that is big stuff. Hey, congratulations. So I Peabody, I never heard of it, but that's not my world. But one of the things I say to people all the time, one of the most jarring statements that is said in the promise, and me and Maribel laugh about it all the time, when she makes the statement, Warner can't succeed without white families. And, you know, I tell people, I give a lot of speeches and things of that nature. And, you know, I speak to congregations, and I speak to community organizations that are full of Black folks. And I tell folks all the time, look, I'm a 6 foot, 245 pound, bald head Black man. I am unapologetic about who I am. So when people was like, well, how dare you let her say that? I said, well, if you just calm down and listen, what we're saying is, Warner, remember I told you, 37206, 66% white. Warner's been historically Black. Warner has all the Black kids in the neighborhood already. We need to grow the school, because in education, the money follows bodies. So if we're talking about truly integrating the school, we need those white kids, those white families in the neighborhood that have historically chosen Laughlin or any other school to actually join in and come to Warner as well. So when we say we need those families, absolutely we need those families, because that's going to truly begin to integrate a school. And one of the things that we find out, when you integrate a school, integrate society, everybody wins. Because one of the best things about life is being around people that don't look like you, that don't believe like you, that don't talk like you, and that don't love like you. So it doesn't matter if any of those things, because what we also know is the innocence of the youth. Children don't really care about that. They just see, there's another 5-year-old. I want to go play. Come on, would you be my friend? Like, so they just get excited. It's as adults, we begin to put our adult views on things. So it's actually going really well. We've done a lot of partnering with Laughlin. We actually have a really good relationship, because me and Christy, we were good friends before I even came to Warner when I was in South Nashville. So that has just really helped kind of fast track those schools' relationships.
I do have 2 comments afterwards. First of all, sign me up to be a volunteer reader.
All right.
And secondly, I was a librarian at Tennessee State for 24 years. So you probably passed through and saw me standing at the circulation desk trying to keep order in a very unorderly place.
Look, I know I did. And I probably need to apologize to you, because I'm one of the ones that came in the library. As you can tell, I talk loud, and I'm super loud everywhere I go. So I'm that one that you had to shh. It's the library. And I probably look like
anymore, but we managed to keep order.
But so no, thank you for so you obviously know the power of books and the escape it gives to students. So I appreciate everything you did, especially at Tennessee State. Because Tennessee State helped mold me into the person I am today.
Well, we do good there. We did, they still are.
Absolutely.
Under some very trying circumstances.
Absolutely.
All righty. Well, let's close in prayer. Oh, eternal God, bless all schools, colleges, and universities, especially Warner Elementary, that they may be lively centers for sound learning, new discovery, and the pursuit of wisdom, and grant that those who teach and those who learn may find you to be the source of all truth, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gibbs. We appreciate you, and I'm
sure.
sure you're hearing from many of us on ways how we can engage with Warner. Thank you.
And Heather, how do we get in touch? Ricki, how do we get in touch with you?
I'm gonna put my email and my cell phone in the chat right now.
Thank you.
So that way, if you need to get in contact with me, you feel free. So my email is just Ricki.Gibbs, and Ricki is Ricki. Look, you see, I got a story for everything. When I was a youngster, people used to tease me and call me Ricki Lake all the time, because I'm the only boy that spelled his name with an I. And Ricki Lake was on TV, and she spelled her name just like me. So it took me a long time to be comfortable spelling my name, because all the other boys spelled it with a Y, but it's Ricki with an I. So Ricki.Gibbs at mmps.org. And my cell phone number is area code 615-947-8313. So I would love to not only invite you over to tour the school, because to see the school is to love the school, to see that we have a full dance studio, we do Chinese drumming, choir, guitar, strings. So we have all type of exciting things happening for our boys and girls when it comes to exposure. So I would love for you to come over, see the school, and then obviously figure out ways that we can partner to continue doing this life-changing work. So, and I'm gonna stop talking because I like to talk. But on behalf of the faculty and staff and the students of Warner, thank you all tonight for just listening to our story, engaging with your questions. Again, it takes the whole community to do this work. And if it wasn't for people like you who are willing to ask the hard questions, who are willing to do the work, we would be doing this work in isolation. So I know you said thank me, but I wanted to make sure I said thank you because we appreciate you all.
Well, thank you. And I
Thank
hope
you
have
so much.
a good last week and a half or whatever, week and 2 days, right? Left in
6.5.
Well, I hope you've been strong and look forward to next year.
All right. Hey, thank you all. Have a great evening.
Bye, y'all.
See you, Dr. Gibbs.
Bye.
All right now.
Bye.